If you ever find yourself wandering through the far south of Peru, there's a moment where the modern world slowly fades behind you. The noise drops first, then the movement. Then, almost like someone turned a dimmer switch, the colors soften into sandy golds and dusty browns, and suddenly you're standing in one of the calmest, quietest places on Earth. This is the Nazca Desert. At first glance, it doesn't really look like the kind of place that would hold one of history's greatest mysteries. There are no tall temples, no big statues, no carved kings staring down at you with stone eyebrows. Just endless open land, heat waves rolling like slow oceans. The sort of silence where even your thoughts sound loud. The kind of dryness that makes you reach for water, even if you're not thirsty. But here's the funny thing about deserts. They're quiet, yes, but they're rarely empty. If you stand still long enough, if you let the warm wind brush past your ears, and if you let your eyes follow the horizon where the sky and earth meet, the desert starts whispering its secrets. Not loudly, of course. Deserts don't yell. They're too classy for that. But softly, calmly, like it's been waiting for someone patient enough to listen. And this desert, the Nazca Desert, holds secrets so huge, they can barely be seen from the ground. Literally, because somewhere beneath your feet, stretching across the sand and gravel, are enormous drawings, some so big you could fit several football fields inside them and still have room for snacks. These shapes aren't painted. They aren't carved deep. They're simply made by brushing away the darker top layer of stones and revealing the lighter earth underneath. Easy to make, if what you want is a line 10 meters long. Harder if what you want is a perfect hummingbird hundreds of meters wide. People call them the Nazca Lines, long lines that run straight as arrows, spirals that twist like a giant's doodle, shapes of animals, monkeys, birds, and spiders, so big that the only way to see the full picture is to fly above them. Which, of course, is funny, because the people who made them lived long before airplanes, drones, helicopters, or anything even close to that. So the Nazca Lines quietly ask a question, one that has puzzled historians, scientists, pilots, travelers, and daydreamers for decades. Why would people draw something no one on the ground could fully see? It's the kind of question that doesn't yell for attention. It just hangs in the air, calm, mysterious, waiting. Before we dive deeper into those giant shapes, though, we should gently step backward in time, way back, to the people who made them. The Nazca culture. Between 200 BCE and 600 CE, these people lived in this harsh desert valley. Imagine waking up each morning, knowing you live in one of the driest places on Earth. The kind of place where rain is so rare you might start to think the sky is just being dramatic. Life here wasn't simple. The sun was strong, the soil was stubborn, and water, precious water, was something you didn't waste even in your dreams. But the Nazca people were clever, calm, practical, and surprisingly artistic. They didn't panic in the heat. They learned how to work with their land. They dug deep underground canals called puquios, bringing hidden water up to the surface. They planted crops like cotton, corn, beans, and squash. They made pottery so colorful and detailed that it looks like they painted each piece while half asleep during a cozy night. Steady hands, soft lines, gentle patterns. Their textiles, beautiful. their rituals, deep, their connection to nature, strong enough that they didn't just survive in the desert, they belonged to it. And maybe that is why the desert still remembers them. Now, picture the Nazca people walking slowly across the desert floor. No rush, no noise, just simple tools. Wooden stakes, ropes, baskets, things any ordinary person could carry. And yet, with these simple tools, they began to make the desert speak. They didn't carve deep trenches. They didn't build tall pillars. They just removed the darker stones, exposing the lighter sand below. And they did it with a calm accuracy that almost doesn't make sense. Long straight lines that run for kilometers. Curves so smooth they could pass for modern design. Figures drawn with a confidence you'd expect from someone who somehow knew what it would look like from above. Maybe they did these drawings during rituals. Maybe during processions. Maybe it was a tradition passed down through generations. Parents teaching children where to place each stone, how to measure each distance. Maybe the air was filled with soft chanting or quiet, focused work. Or maybe it was just another normal day for them, a community project, like painting a giant mural, except, on the entire desert. And if you close your eyes for a moment, you might imagine them there now. A group of quiet, skilled people walking in the sun, carefully marking out the shape of a giant spider, or tracing the long tail of a hummingbird, or laying out a line so straight that you start to wonder if they had some ancient laser level nobody knows about. But more than anything, the Nazca lines are calm. There's nothing rushed or chaotic about them. Just steady hands and patient hearts. The same calm feeling you get when you sit by a window on a rainy night, listening to soft tapping and warm wind. Except here the wind is dry and warm, and the tapping is the gentle sound of footsteps in sand. So now, standing again in our present moment, here, in the quiet of the Nazca Desert, you feel the same warm wind that brushed against the Nazca people 2,000 years ago. You hear the same silence. You breathe the same dry air. And the question rises again, softly. Why did they make these giant drawings? Who were they speaking to? And what message were they trying to send across time? No need to rush for the answer. This is a bedtime journey, after all. Soft steps, slow breathing, a gentle walk across ancient ground. Tonight, we begin exploring one of the world's most peaceful mysteries. So relax, lay back, take a slow breath. The desert is ready to share its story. Before the Nazca lines spread across the desert floor like giant whispers, there were the Nazca people themselves, living, working, laughing, struggling, and finding beauty in a world that, honestly, wasn't always friendly. If chapter 1 was about the desert's quiet mystery, this chapter is about the people who learned how to call that desert home. And home it truly was. Imagine waking up in a small Nazca village around 2,000 years ago. The air is cool in the early morning, the kind of cool that disappears the moment the sun climbs up. The huts are simple, woven walls, clay floors, roofs made from reeds or branches. Nothing fancy, but strong enough to handle the sharp desert winds. You step outside, stretch a little, and the first thing you notice isn't noise. It's silence. A deep, peaceful silence where even the birds seem to take their time waking up. But life wasn't lazy here. Not at all. The Nazca people were always thinking about one thing above all else: water. Water was life. Water was survival. Water was the reason you woke up early and worked late. In a valley where rain barely visited, water was a treasure greater than gold. Every drop mattered. If someone wasted water, you could almost imagine an elder looking at them like, "Really? We don't live inside a cloud, you know." And so the Nazca people became experts in finding it. They dug deep underground canals, called puquios, twisting through the earth like hidden rivers. These weren't small little ditches. They were long, strong, carefully engineered tunnels that could bring water from deep beneath the desert and guide it to the fields. You could walk beside one and feel a small breeze rising from the spiral-shaped openings. Cool, fresh, almost magical. Thanks to this clever system, they grew crops that seem impossible in such a dry place: cotton, beans, corn, peanuts, chili peppers, and squash. Imagine a bright green field sitting calmly in the middle of a desert that looks like it hasn't seen rain since dinosaurs were cracking jokes. It must have been a beautiful sight. Daily life meant tending to these fields. People bent low, patting soil, checking canals, harvesting cotton under the hot sun. Kids might run past carrying pottery jars, while elders sat nearby weaving or shaping clay into bowls. Even though life was hard, there was a gentle rhythm to it. A routine. Work in the morning, rest at noon, more work in the evening, and gathering at night. And at night, when the desert cooled and the stars scattered across the sky like endless grains of silver sand, that was when stories came alive. Because the Nazca people believed the world wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. They didn't look at nature like it was just something to use. Nature was alive. The mountains were powerful spirits. The rivers, even small ones, carried blessings. The sun and moon were guides. Animals weren't just animals. They held meanings, messages, lessons. If you asked a Nazca priest what the hummingbird meant, he might smile and say speed, joy, movement. The condor, strength and the sky. The monkey, the playful side of nature. Each animal carried a story, and those stories shaped how people lived. And their art, oh, their art, was full of these symbols. Nazca pottery is one of the most colorful in the ancient world. Bold reds, deep oranges, earthy browns, soft creams. They painted faces, animals, plants, gods, and shapes that made archaeologists squint and say, "Okay, that looks important, but what is it exactly?" Their brushes were steady, their lines smooth, their imagination wide open. Their textiles were just as impressive, bright and detailed, woven with patterns that could take weeks to finish. Imagine sitting for hours, weaving tiny threads into a perfect design while your friend beside you complains about how their thread keeps knotting. Even in ancient times, someone probably said, "Why is this string alive today?" Rituals were another part of their world. Offerings were made to the mountains and rivers. People walked together in processions, carrying food, cloth, or ceramics as gifts to the gods. Music played, flutes made from reeds, drums built from wood and hide. The sound must have echoed across the desert, rising into the cool air, giving a heartbeat to the land. And in all of this, daily life, art, farming, beliefs, there was something deeper growing. A worldview that connected earth and sky, humans and nature, visible things and invisible meanings. So when the time came to make the Nazca lines, maybe it wasn't a strange idea after all. Think about it. If you believe nature has a voice, if you believe the gods can see from above, if you believe animals are symbols of life, strength, and balance, then drawing huge shapes in the desert isn't random. It's communication, a message, a prayer, a way to connect the world below with the world above. And the people were already experts in working with the land. They knew how to move earth gently, how to measure distances, how to create patterns. They weren't building giant stone temples, but in their eyes, the desert itself was the temple. It makes you imagine a moment, a group of Nazca leaders standing on a hill, looking down at the valley. One of them says, "We need to speak to the gods." Another nods. A third scratches their head and says, "Okay, but you want us to draw a monkey how big?" But they do it. Not quickly, not carelessly, but slowly, calmly, with the same patience they used in their pottery, weaving, farming, and rituals. A giant figure in the sand wasn't a wild idea. It was the natural next step of their spiritual life. And so, the lines weren't made by strangers or dreamers or some forgotten group from another world. They were made by people very much like us. People who woke up tired, worked under the sun, shared stories, made art, raised children, respected nature, and tried to understand the world around them. People who lived before the geoglyphs, but were quietly preparing their minds and hearts for them. The Nazca civilization, simple as it might seem at first glance, was full of imagination, discipline, rhythm, and spiritual depth. They didn't just survive the desert, they shaped it. They listened to it. And eventually they spoke back through the lines. So now, as we move forward in this journey, we keep this warm picture of their life in mind. Because to understand the mystery of the giant figures, we must first understand the people who walked slowly across these sands long before us. Their world was humble, hard, beautiful, deep. And it was only the beginning. When you look at the Nazca Lines from above, those long, perfect shapes stretching across the desert, it's easy to think, okay, who brought the drone? Who was the project manager? And how did they do this without messing up at least once? But the truth is far softer, far calmer, and honestly, much more interesting. Because the Nazca Lines were not made with big machines, lasers, or secret ancient GPS. They were made with simple tools and a lot of patience. So let's walk through it gently, step by step, like we're standing beside the Nazca people as they work. Before anyone touched a stone, the Nazca people were already experts in reading the desert. They lived there for centuries. They understood the land, its colors, its textures, its behavior. They knew that the top layer of soil was covered in dark, iron-rich stones, and beneath those stones, a lighter, softer layer of sand and dirt. So imagine a desert that's basically a giant chalkboard, already prepared for drawing. All you have to do is brush away the dark pebbles, and the pale earth underneath appears like a glowing line. Simple, right? Yes, simple. But simple doesn't mean easy. Now, picture a small team of Nazca workers standing under the bright, dry sun. Before they start drawing anything, they take out their most important tools, wooden stakes, ropes, small baskets, sharp eyes, and patience, lots of patience. They begin by placing wooden stakes into the ground at key points. These stakes mark where a line should start, where it should end, or where a curve needs to turn. Think of it like drawing dots before connecting them. You know how today you might draw a straight line using a ruler? Well, the Nazca people used a desert-sized ruler, a rope tied between two stakes. No metal tools, no fancy measuring machines, just rope, stakes, and teamwork. Trust me, teamwork was important. One person pulling the rope too far and boom, you've got a crooked line and a lot of annoyed desert artists. Some of these lines stretch for kilometers. They are so straight that even modern engineers have raised eyebrow after eyebrow. So how did they do it? Well, the method was simple. Tie a rope between two stakes, pull it tight, and walk along it while brushing stones aside. If the rope stays tight, the line stays straight. The secret wasn't magic. It wasn't aliens. It was tension. Rope tension. Something you might use when tying your laundry or setting up a tent. Imagine a Nazca worker walking slowly along the rope path, sweeping aside stones with a calm, steady motion. Maybe another person follows behind, carrying a basket to pick up extra stones. Maybe someone else checks the rope stays straight. It's quiet, almost peaceful. A group effort where everyone knows their role. They didn't rush. They didn't panic. They just worked with the land. This part is where people today get confused. How did they make a huge monkey shape without seeing it from above? How did they know the spiral tail was even? How did the hummingbird's wings end up so perfect? The answer: they used grids. It's the same method kids use to copy drawings today. Drawing a picture inside a grid, then enlarging that grid into a bigger version. The Nazca did this on desert scale. They likely drew small versions of the animals on pottery or cloth, divided those drawings into small squares, and then used stakes to mark the same squares on the desert floor. Each square would guide them in placing lines and curves in the right spot. Piece by piece, square by square, the huge shapes came to life. No airplane needed, no drone footage required, just planning, skill, and slow, steady movement across the land. Once the plan was set, the stakes were placed, and the grids were laid out, the real work began. Workers used simple tools, sticks, brushes made from plant fibers, or even their bare hands, to sweep away the dark stones on top. It wasn't digging. It wasn't carving. Just cleaning away the surface. As they brushed, the lighter soil beneath appeared, forming bright, clear lines that could last for centuries. And because the desert is so dry and windless, the lines stayed sharp. No rain to wash them away. No strong winds to cover them. The heat and dryness protected them like a giant natural museum. If you've ever cleaned a dusty table and made a line with your finger, you've basically done a tiny version of what the Nazca people did, just not as neatly, and probably not while making a 200-meter long hummingbird. Even after the drawings were complete, the Nazca people may have returned to maintain them. A line isn't permanent unless you care for it. People probably walked along them during rituals, brushing off stones that drifted back over time. The desert helped too. The climate here is so stable that even footprints last longer than usual. It's the perfect environment for long, lasting art. The true beauty of the Nazca Lines lies in how calmly brilliant the engineering was. They didn't have blueprints, satellite images, towers, airships, scaffolding, but they had simple math, careful measurement, knowledge of the land, patience, and teamwork. Sometimes quiet solutions are the strongest ones. The Nazca people didn't overthink things. They didn't need extreme technology. They worked slowly, step by step, trusting their tools and their teamwork. And the result? Art so big and precise that even modern pilots stared out of their cockpits and said, "Wait, what is that?" Their genius wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't shout from the rooftops. It was calm. It was human. It grew from living close to the land, understanding nature, and respecting it. They saw the desert as a canvas, the sky as the audience, and the lines as a bridge between both worlds. Quiet engineering, quiet brilliance, the kind that whispers across 2,000 years and still makes people wonder. As the sun rises or sets over the Nazca Desert, the long shadows stretch across the sand, and the shapes below seem to wake up, quietly, slowly, like ancient drawings breathing for a moment. This is where we step closer to the actual figures themselves: the monkey, the hummingbird, the spider, the condor, and of course, the very dramatic, very mysterious astronaut, waving from a hillside like he's trying to say hello across the centuries. Each shape feels like a dream someone drew on the earth. Let's explore them with that same soft, dreamlike feeling. If you've ever seen the Nazca monkey from above, it's hard not to smile. It looks playful, like it's stretching after a long nap. Its long spiral tail curves in a perfect loop that seems almost hypnotic, like the desert itself is slowly turning. Scientists believe the monkey symbolized water or rain. Why? Because the monkey lives in the Amazon rainforest far away from the coast. So drawing one here might have been a request to the gods. Hey, we could use some water, please. Not too much. Just enough so the crops don't faint. Some researchers think the spiral tail may represent cycles of water, seasons, or even life itself. Others say it could be a symbol of movement or change. Either way, the monkey is one of the most loved figures. It feels playful, aware, almost friendly. You can imagine someone thousands of years ago standing beside the shape, hands on hips, thinking, "Yeah, that tail came out nice." The hummingbird might be the most famous Nazca figure. It's long, elegant, and impossibly straight, lined. Its wings stretch outward like a soft greeting. The beak is sharp and delicate. Everything about it looks precise, peaceful, and balanced. Hummingbirds in ancient Andean cultures symbolized energy, vitality, and the ability to travel between worlds. These tiny birds fly fast, move in sudden bursts, and appear almost magical when hovering. For people living in such a harsh desert, the hummingbird may have represented hope. The idea that life can still be bright and beautiful even in tough places. Some theories say the hummingbird pointed toward the solstice sunrise, acting as a celestial marker. Others say its shape guided ceremonial pathways. People might have walked along its wings during rituals. Whatever the meaning, the hummingbird feels like a gentle spark of joy drawn onto the desert floor. When you look at it, you almost expect it to flutter away. Now the spider, this one is interesting. The lines are simple but elegant. Long legs stretch outward. The body is small but centered. One leg even has an extra detail. A long, thin line that could represent a thread. Scientists believe the spider symbolized fertility, especially water-based fertility. In ancient traditions, Some spiders were seen as bringers of rain or guardians of water. Others were tied to weaving and creation, since spiders make webs the way humans weave cloth. The Nazca spider might have been a spiritual symbol for weaving life together, bringing growth to the desert fields, strength to families and order to the world. Plus, I like to imagine someone creating it and quietly complaining, "Why does a spider need so many legs? 6 would have been enough." The condor is one of the largest figures, and fittingly so. The real bird is massive, gliding across the Andes with wings that seem wide enough to hug a mountain. The Nazca drawing captures that scale beautifully. The wings stretch out with strong lines. The shape feels powerful yet calm, like a spirit resting on the ground. In Andean belief, the condor was a sacred messenger, a bird that carried prayers up to the heavens. Seeing a condor fly was a sign of connection between earth and sky. For the Nazca people, drawing a condor may have symbolized communication with the gods or the higher world. Some researchers think the condor shape was used during ceremonies. Groups might have walked its outlines, moving together slowly like a small human version of the bird's flight. It's a lovely image, people walking in silence, following the wings of a giant bird drawn into the desert. And then there's him, astronaut. This figure stands on the side of a hill instead of the flat desert floor. He has big eyes, a round head, one arm raised as if waving, and a body that looks almost like a person in a suit. Now, scientists don't actually think he was an astronaut. That name came from modern people who looked at the figure and said, "He looks like he's wearing a helmet." And honestly, he kind of does. But archaeologists believe he is more likely a shaman or a deity. The raised hand might be a greeting or a sign. The large eyes could represent watching the heavens or the spiritual world. Still, it's fun to imagine him standing there for thousands of years, waving at anyone who passes like, "Hey, welcome to the desert. Don't forget water." Beyond the animals, there are hundreds of long, straight lines stretching across the desert. Some run for kilometers, some connect to shapes, some go nowhere obvious, some cross each other like giant crossroads. These lines might have been ceremonial pathways, walked during rituals, water markers pointing to underground sources, astronomical alignments connecting to stars or solstices, spiritual roads linking sacred places, or simply symbols meant for the gods to see from above. When you look at them from an airplane, they feel endless, like messages written in a language the earth created, and we're still trying to read. This is where the dreamlike part begins, because no one knows for sure what the Nazca artists wanted to express. But we can gently imagine. Maybe the shapes were prayers. Maybe they were messages to the sky. Maybe they were stories drawn in a place large enough for nature to see. Maybe they were a way to bring comfort, hope, or order to a hard world. The animals they chose weren't random. Each creature had a meaning tied to life, seasons, water, and spirit. Maybe the Nazca believed that by drawing them on a giant scale, they could bring balance to their world. When you walk through the desert today, the lines still hold that feeling. The shapes are silent, but the silence feels full, like a paused song still humming quietly somewhere. The Nazca lines aren't loud. They don't shout their meaning. They whisper, softly, slowly, patiently. And maybe that's the point. They invite you to wonder without needing an answer. They ask you to look at the desert and see more than sand. They remind you that humans, no matter the time or place, have always searched for connection. Between earth and sky, body and spirit, people and the unknown. The desert keeps its secrets. The shapes keep their stories, and we keep imagining. So, here we are again, drifting deeper into the desert night, where the air feels still, the sand feels endless, and the Nazca Lines stretch quietly beneath the sky like thoughts written in the earth. And tonight, we're entering the part that everyone always wonders about. Why? Why did people make drawings so huge that even they couldn't fully see them? Don't worry, we're keeping things calm. No wild alien theories. Just soft curiosity, warm ideas, and a few theories that won't make you sit up in bed. Some researchers believe the Nazca Lines weren't made to be seen from above at all. Instead, they were made to be walked. Picture this: the Nazca people, dressed in their bright woven clothes, moving slowly along a long straight line for a ceremony. No rushing, no noise. Just the soft shuffle of feet in the sand, maybe a drum in the distance. Like a quiet parade, but spiritually meaningful. Maybe the shapes, the giant animals, were sacred symbols. Maybe walking along certain lines was like sending a message to the gods. A kind of, hey, we're still here, we're thankful. Also, please send rain. Some lines have little branches and turns, almost like a gentle maze. It's easy to imagine groups moving together, praying for good crops, or asking for protection. If you've ever walked in a big circle while trying to calm your mind, you know the feeling. Slow, steady, grounding. These long desert lines might have been their version of meditation paths, but on a massive scale, it's quite peaceful to think about. Now picture the desert at night. The stars look close enough to touch. The air is clear, still, and sharp. You don't need a telescope here. The sky feels like it comes to you. This is where the next theory comes in. The Nazca Lines might be connected to the stars, sun, and seasons. Some researchers noticed that certain lines line up with the sunrise during the solstice, the longest day of the year. Others match the sunset during the shortest day. It's like the desert had its own quiet calendar. The Nazca people were farmers, and in a place where water is rare and every harvest is precious, knowing the right time to plant wasn't just helpful, it was everything. So maybe the long straight lines were like reminders. When the sun rises right along this line, it's time to prepare the fields. Or, when the shadow falls over that stone, the new season is here. Some lines even point toward constellations that were important in the ancient world. The monkey, for example, is sometimes linked to the constellation Ursa Major. The hummingbird might connect to a cluster of stars that return with certain rains. Is this proven? Not fully. But it's a peaceful idea. The Nazca desert acting as a giant notebook where the sky and earth meet. And honestly, it's kind of poetic. Now we step into a theory that is gentle, practical, and probably closer to daily life water. If you've been in a desert, even for a few hours, you know how quickly your mind starts thinking about water. For the Nazca people, water wasn't just important, it was sacred. Rains were rare. Rivers dried up. They depended on underground water channels, and strange natural formations called puquios, which worked like ancient aqueducts. Some lines, especially the long straight ones, seem to point toward water sources underground, not in a perfect GPS-style way, but close enough to make archaeologists raise an eyebrow. Theories say the shapes of animals might also be tied to water. The hummingbird a symbol of spring, the frog often connected to rain in many cultures. The whale may be tied to the coast and sea life, which the Nazca traded with and respected. This theory suggests that the lines weren't just messages to the gods, they were reminders to each other. Almost like saying, dig here, walk this way. Water beneath this area. Imagine living in a world where the biggest treasure isn't gold, it's moisture hiding deep in the ground. Let's say the Nazca people didn't have big stone temples like the Maya or towering pyramids like the Egyptians. But they did have something else, a space. So much empty space. Some researchers believe the Nazca Lines formed a huge calendar system, made simply by using the landscape. The long lines could mark important days. The shapes could point to seasons linked to animals, like when certain birds migrated or when certain insects appeared. Nature was the guide, and the desert was the canvas. It's a calm and practical idea. Why build giant stone structures if the sand can hold the same information? And desert sand, by the way, is a surprisingly loyal friend. It doesn't move much. No rain to wash things away. No plants to grow over your work. Your calendar stays right where you left it for 2,000 years. Now that's durability. Some archaeologists think the Nazca Lines don't have one single meaning. Instead, they believe the lines might be like a multi-tool, good for many things at once. Spiritual ceremonies, practical navigation, water markers, astronomy, cultural expression, a bit of everything. Maybe one line helped with farming seasons. Another marked a river. Another was for rituals. The animals could be symbols of myths or stories. The shapes could be invitations to walk with the gods. The long straight lines could be routes from village to village. It doesn't have to be all one answer. Life itself rarely is. And honestly, it feels calming to imagine the Nazca Lines as a blend of life, faith, nature, and community. A soft web of meaning spread across the desert, each part helping in its own small way. And so we return to that soft question again, why did they do it? We don't know for sure. But maybe the mystery is part of what makes the Nazca Lines so soothing. Not everything from the past needs to be solved. Some things are allowed to stay open, quiet, and full of wonder. Maybe the Nazca people didn't make the lines for us to understand. Maybe they made them for the earth, for the sky, for their gods, for each other, or simply because it felt right. And as you breathe slowly, letting the desert night stretch around you, it feels okay not to have all the answers. Sometimes mystery is a comfort of its own. The desert of Nazca is a quiet place, silent, wide, and patient. For more than 1,000 years, it kept its secret lines hidden in plain sight. People walked across them, lived near them, farmed around them, and somehow never saw the full shapes. Because to truly see the Nazca Lines, you had to do something a bit unusual for ancient times. You had to leave the ground. And that didn't happen until the 1900s, so tonight, let's float into that moment. The moment when humans first looked down from the sky and suddenly realized the desert was holding ancient artwork the size of cities. It was the early 20th century, a time when planes still felt like brave experiments and engines sounded like someone angrily shaking a metal box. Local pilots were flying over southern Peru, mostly delivering mail, scouting routes, or probably trying not to fall out of the sky. But then something strange began to happen. They kept seeing shapes, lines, perfect straight ones, long ones stretching over kilometers, curves too smooth to be accidents. And then, animals, huge animals. One pilot later said that at first he thought he was seeing old roads. Then he realized roads don't usually twist into hummingbirds or monkeys doing yoga poses. Imagine being that pilot. You're just doing your job, flying a shaky plane, hoping the engine behaves, and suddenly the desert is like, surprise! Giant art show below. It must have felt magical, a little spooky, a little exciting, a desert whisper saying, it's about time someone noticed. Word began to spread. Scientists and explorers heard rumors of massive drawings on the ground, but many didn't believe it at first. People said things like, come on, who draws a bird bigger than a football stadium? Well, apparently the Nazca people did. And then came the woman who changed everything, Maria Reiche. If the Nazca Lines had a guardian angel, it would be her. Walking across the sand with a notebook, a compass, and more patience than most of us have for loading screens. Maria was a German mathematician and teacher who moved to Peru in the 1930s. She heard stories about the strange lines in the desert and decided to take a look for herself. It wasn't long before she became completely, deeply, absolutely fascinated. Imagine her first time climbing a small hill and seeing a figure slowly appear, a monkey with a spiral tail, so big she could hardly see the end of it. Maria didn't just study the lines. She dedicated her life to them. She measured them, protected them, and sometimes literally swept the sand off them using a broom. Yes, a broom. While the world was inventing new machines and gadgets, she was like, no thank you. I have my broom, my ruler, and this desert. I'm good. People in Nazca grew used to seeing her walking alone in the hot sun, wearing long sleeves, a hat, and carrying stacks of paper that were constantly trying to blow away. But she didn't mind. She believed the lines were one of the greatest achievements of ancient America, and she wanted the world to see their beauty and meaning. Because in many ways, Maria didn't discover the lines, she revealed them. Once Maria's detailed maps spread, archaeologists finally began to take the Nazca Lines seriously. They flew planes, climbed towers, drew sketches, and slowly connected all the shapes. Scientists from around the world came to Peru. They loved exploring the desert, though a few probably complained about the heat. If you've ever walked on hot sand in the afternoon, you don't need me to explain. Some experts thought the lines were religious. Some thought they were calendars. Some thought they were roads. Some thought Maria's astronomical ideas were right. Others said she was reading too much into the stars. But what all the experts agreed on was simple. The Nazca Lines were no accident. They were huge, intentional, carefully planned and stunning. One archaeologist said walking among them felt like standing inside a message that wasn't addressed to you, but you could feel its meaning anyway. A beautiful way to put it, And through it all, Maria kept working, day after day, year after year, measuring, protecting. The desert can be lonely, but she made it feel like home. By the mid-20th century, newspapers and magazines finally started writing about the Nazca Lines. People everywhere became curious. Some were amazed. Some were confused. Some were like, wait, how did we not know about this until now? Fair question. The answer is simply, you just can't see the big shapes from the ground. Not even a little. To the Nazca people, the lines probably blended into the landscape like paths. But from the air, they were breathtaking. Soon TV crews arrived with cameras. Documentaries were filmed. Researchers came from universities across the world. And the Nazca Desert, which had been silent for centuries, became a soft hub of discovery. Tourists began taking flights in small planes, the kind that wobble just enough to make you question all your life choices, just to see the lines from above. And every time someone leaned out of a tiny plane window and whispered, a part of the desert's old story was told again. Maria spent almost 50 years studying, protecting, and sharing the Nazca Lines. She fought to keep cars and trucks from driving over them. She helped set up official paths. She taught people why the lines mattered. She even worked with the Peruvian government to create protected zones. Locals began calling her La Dama de las Lines, the Lady of the Lines. When she passed away in 1998, Peru honored her as a national treasure. And today, when you fly over Nazca, you'll often see a small building near the desert. Maria's old home, now a museum. Inside are her tools, her notebooks, her sketches, and photos of her walking endlessly across the sand. She didn't just study history, she became part of it. So here we are, floating above the desert in our minds, looking down at lines that waited more than 1,000 years for someone to see them. A few brave pilots took to the sky. A brilliant woman mapped every shape. Scientists dug deeper. The world listened. And the desert, which had been quietly holding this secret the whole time, finally shared it. There's something magical about that. Not loud magic, not fireworks, but soft magic. The kind that appears when patience meets curiosity, when humans finally look down and see what was always there. The Nazca Desert may look quiet, but it's still full of surprises. Even after 1,000 years of silence, it somehow keeps whispering new things to anyone patient enough to listen. And now, instead of explorers with compasses and notebooks, the desert is being watched by something very different: satellites, drones, lasers, scanners, basically everything that buzzes, floats, or blinks. Modern technology has joined the story, and the results are kind of amazing. So tonight, let's glide into this chapter, calm, slow, and curious, as we watch old mysteries meet new tools. Imagine a satellite drifting high above Earth. It's not trying to be dramatic. It's just doing its job, taking pictures, checking weather, probably judging us from above. And then, one day, it catches a strange shape on the ground in Peru. A triangle, a long line, maybe even a faded animal. This is how some new Nazca lines were first spotted. Researchers began noticing faint marks on satellite images, lines so weak that you couldn't see them from the ground. But from space, they suddenly made sense. It felt like the desert had drawn these shapes in pencil. and time had erased most of the lines, but satellites, with their super zoom powers, could still see the ghosts of the drawings. Scientists started scanning more images, more angles, more zooming in until the pixels probably felt shy. And little by little, they found dozens of geoglyphs that no human had identified before. It's kind of funny when you think about it. The Nazca people made drawings so large that only people in the sky could see them. And now, 1,000 years later, people in the sky again are finding the ones we missed. History really does like looping around. Satellites are great, but sometimes you need something a bit closer, something that can swoop down, hover over details, and peek into places humans can't walk. Enter drones. Tiny flying tech, birds with cameras strapped to their bellies. They buzz around, recording detailed images of the desert floor. And honestly, they found so many lines that archaeologists are probably running out of new file names. Some of the geoglyphs discovered by drones were basically invisible from ground level. The lines were too faint, too shallow, or covered by stones and dust. But from above, suddenly you can see a huge cat stretching across a hillside, a shape of a warrior, more geometric patterns, curved paths, even lines that look like ancient walkways. Each new discovery is like the desert giving a small nod. Here, you missed this one. Researchers now fly drones across areas that were once ignored. And every year, new shapes appear, some tiny, some massive, all mysterious. One archaeologist said that using drones in Nazca feels like turning on a light in a dark room that's been locked for centuries. Pretty poetic for a guy holding a buzzing remote. Of course, not everything is found from the air. Some secrets hide in the dirt itself. Scientists use ground scanning tools like LiDAR, soil analysis, and mapping equipment to understand how the pathways were made. They've found old footprints, worn trails, and places where people walked in long lines during ceremonies. Imagine hundreds of people moving quietly through the desert, stepping carefully so the shapes would stay clear. Some pathways weren't meant to be drawings at all. They were ritual walkways leading to sacred spots or water sources. By studying soil layers, researchers can tell which lines were walked on the most, which ones were left alone, which ones might have been part of a big festival, and which ones might have had a purpose we still don't understand. It's like reading a diary written in dust. A really ancient, really sandy diary. Modern tools didn't only bring discoveries, they also brought worries. Because what satellites and drones can see clearly, cars and tourists can damage just as clearly. Some geoglyphs lie near modern roads. Some are close to farms. Some are even near mining areas. A single tire track can cut across a line that survived 1,000 years. That's why scientists and the Peruvian government have created stronger protection rules. You can't just wander around anymore. You need paths, guides, and approved routes. And honestly, that's a good thing. The desert is quiet and peaceful, but it's also fragile. The lines survived because the climate protected them. But human activity, that's a whole different problem. In recent years, researchers started using technology not only to discover new lines, but also to check their health, like doctors scanning an ancient patient. They track erosion, wind damage, foot traffic, even changes in temperature that might affect the ground. The desert is still strong, but it needs care. And luckily, it has more protectors now than ever before. You'd think with satellites, drones, lasers, maps, and about 1 million digital photos, we'd finally understand everything about the Nazca Lines, but nope. Modern technology brought answers, yes, but it also brought more puzzles. Like, why do some geoglyphs overlap older ones? Why are some animal shapes perfect and others a bit strange? Why do straight lines run for kilometers with no clear meaning? Were some drawings made for rituals we don't understand anymore? And why do some shapes point toward mountains or valleys that seem random? Every new discovery leads to new theories, and every theory opens a new mystery. It's like the desert is saying, you can look closer, but I won't tell you everything. Maybe that's part of its charm. The Nazca Lines don't want to lose their secrets all at once. They like to reveal themselves slowly, calmly, and only to those who care enough to keep searching. Think about it for a moment. 1,000 years ago, people made huge drawings using ropes, sticks, and simple tools. Today, scientists study those drawings with machines that can fly, scan, and map an entire landscape in seconds. Old hands and modern hands reaching across time. It's kind of beautiful. The desert stays quiet, the lines stay still, but now, the sky above them is full of watchers, satellites drifting, drones buzzing gently, researchers studying images on screen. And each time a new geoglyph appears in a photo, each time a faint line becomes clear after centuries, it feels like opening a tiny gift from the past. Technology didn't solve the mystery, but it helped us see more of it. And sometimes seeing more is enough, because mysteries don't always want endings. Some just want attention, and the Nazca Lines, old, patient, and still glowing under the sun, are finally getting the attention they waited for. The Nazca Desert is a place that doesn't like giving straight answers. It's quiet, wide, full of sun, and full of secrets. Even with all the research, all the maps, all the drones buzzing around like curious metal bees, the Nazca Lines still hold something back. And maybe that's the point. Tonight we're slowing down, breathing out, and gently stepping into the soft side of mystery. The side that doesn't try too hard to solve everything, but instead enjoys the wonder. Let's drift into that calm space. If you ask 10 experts why the Nazca Lines were made, you'll probably get 10 different answers. And all of them sound pretty confident, too. Some say the lines were for walking rituals. Some say they were giant calendars. Some think they pointed to water sources. Some think they were messages to gods. Some say astronomy. Some say agriculture. One researcher even joked, if the Nazca people came back today, they'd probably laugh at all our guesses. The truth is this: every theory explains a part of the story, but none of them explain everything. It's like trying to solve a puzzle where half the pieces are missing. The picture on the box is smudged, and someone mixed in pieces from another puzzle just to mess with you. But weirdly, that makes the whole thing more interesting. Because when a mystery has one clear answer, the story ends. But when the answers stay open, the story keeps breathing. Some people like thinking the Nazca Lines were spiritual. Big symbols, meant for gods watching from the sky. Others prefer a practical explanation. Maybe the lines were used to mark seasons, guide water, or or track ceremonies. But what if the Nazca people didn't separate spiritual from practical at all? What if, to them, the two were the same? In many ancient cultures, daily life and spiritual life were woven together like threads in a cloth. Planting crops wasn't just farming, it was an offering. Walking a path wasn't just movement, it was a prayer. Drawing a hummingbird wasn't just art, it was gratitude for nature. So maybe the Nazca Lines were both useful and sacred. Maybe they were maps and messages and rituals and art all at the same time. Humans today love categories. Ancient people loved meaning. And the desert holds both. When you look at the Nazca Lines, especially from above, you might notice something simple but powerful. Humans love to create. They love shapes. They love art. They love making things bigger than themselves, even if no one else will see it. Imagine the Nazca artists working under the hot sun. They didn't have drones, or ladders, or planes. They didn't climb mountains to check their progress every 5 minutes. They just had a vision. A monkey with a spiral tail, a hummingbird with wings spread wide, a spider with perfect legs, straight lines stretching toward the horizon. They couldn't see the whole picture from the ground, yet they trusted the process. There's something beautiful in that, making art you might never fully see, simply because it feels meaningful. It reminds us that creativity isn't always for applause. Sometimes it's for connection. Sometimes it's for ritual. Sometimes it's just for the joy of making something stay in the world. The Nazca Lines prove that creativity is ancient, and that humans have always wanted to say something, even if they weren't sure who would hear it. There's a gentle truth hiding in the desert sand. Humans like to talk. A lot. They talk to the sky, to the earth, to spirits, to ancestors, and yes, even to people who haven't been born yet. Maybe the Nazca Lines were a way to speak to something bigger, to the mountains they worshipped, to the gods they trusted, to the rain they needed, to future generations who might one day look down from above and say, "Wow, humans don't just want to live in the world, they want to leave marks on it." Some people carve initials in trees, some write books, some paint murals, and the Nazca people, they drew giant animals across the face of the desert. Pretty impressive, honestly. Maybe they believed nature would understand. Maybe they hoped the gods would notice. Maybe they wished the future would remember them. And in a quiet way it worked. We're here now, talking about them. Long after their voices faded, their lines became their story. Their story became a mystery. Their mystery became a bridge, connecting their world and ours. There's something soft and comforting about a mystery that doesn't demand an answer. The Nazca Lines don't challenge us with sharp puzzles. They don't shout. They don't force explanations. They just lie there peacefully, waiting, inviting curiosity, but never rushing it. Unanswered mysteries have a special charm. They remind us that not everything in life needs to be solved to be meaningful. Some things can just be felt. You don't need to know every detail to enjoy a sunset or a song, or a quiet desert full of ancient drawings. Maybe the Nazca Lines are like that, art meant to be wondered about, not conquered. Even Maria Reiche, who spent 50 years studying the lines, once said, "I understand more now, but I still don't understand everything." and she was okay with that. Some questions are better left open. As we reach the end of this chapter, the desert feels a little quieter. The shapes seem to glow softly under the warm light. The monkey, the hummingbird, the long straight roads stretching like gentle breaths. We don't have all the answers, and maybe we don't need them. What matters is the wonder, the imagination, the connection across time. The Nazca Lines are reminders that humans have always reached for something more, something spiritual, something beautiful, something lasting. They remind us that even when the world changes, our desire to create, to express, to leave messages behind stays the same. And as we prepare to move to the final thoughts, it's nice to pause here. Just for a moment, in the soft space between mystery and understanding. The desert doesn't explain itself. It just waits. And maybe that's the most peaceful answer of all.